Studio here by Karis Garland. A very good evening to you. Great to see you.
Hi, Mark.
Starting with the US Treasury Secretary's first, visit to China at a time of heightened tension over trade. Janet Yellen in Beijing, yeah?
That's it, yeah.
Got there in the end. Thank you.
So she arrived this Thursday. She'll be looking to kind of strike a balance between mending ties with China and also standing by the United States. Recent moves that have actually ruffled feathers. Shortly after arriving in Beijing, the Treasury Secretary said her 4-day visit was an opportunity to communicate and avoid misunderstanding. Relations between the world's two biggest economies took another turn for the worse a few days ago when China restricted exports of two metals needed to make computer chips, citing national security concerns. Shelley Sitbon tells us more about this high-stakes but low-expectation trip.
Officially, Janet Yellen and her Chinese counterparts share a common goal: easing the ongoing trade dispute between the two countries. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who visited China before Janet Yellen a few weeks ago, quoted her words.
As Secretary Yellen testified before Congress last week, it would be, as she put it, disastrous for us to decouple and stop all trade and investment with China.
Decoupling is the right word. The world's biggest economies are interdependent. They're each other's largest trading partners. China exported $536 billion worth of goods to the U.S. last year, while the U.S. exported $154 billion. The U.S. trade deficit is what triggered former President Donald Trump's trade war with China, and the battle for leadership in highly sensitive technology has escalated their rivalry. The U.S. and its allies, fearing high tech would be used by the Chinese military, have curbed Beijing's access to some advanced computer chips. Earlier this week, China, who is the world's first producer of rare metals necessary to make those microchips, said it will curb exports. Janet Yellen's goal is to ease tensions. But the U.S. is believed to, at the same time, be preparing new measures that could worsen the crisis. The Wall Street Journal reports the U.S. could restrict Chinese companies' access to U.S. cloud computing services, and it could restrict artificial intelligence chip exports.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden is making his economic case for his 2024 presidential campaign in the traditionally Republican South Carolina. Touring a clean energy plant, Biden said investments in computer chips, batteries and electric vehicles will help the U.S. outcompete China. The White House is making a big push to show progress under what it calls Bidenomics. The president employed the term again on Thursday, saying it meant creating local jobs instead of exporting them for cheap labor costs.
I'm here to talk about what we're doing to invest in America. And I mean invest in America, all of America, starting here in South Carolina. And to talk about the progress we made in building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not trickling down. When you build from the middle out and the bottom up, everybody does well. The wealthy still do very well. But that trickle-down economy, not a whole lot dropped on my dad's kitchen table growing up.
Well, let's take a look at how the markets fared this Thursday. And it was red across the board on Wall Street as investors digested better than expected U.S. jobs data, with speculation that could prompt further interest rate hikes. The Dow Jones closing more than 1% lower, both the S&P and Nasdaq losing around 0.8%. France's national rail operator has announced it's launching a new subsidiary that will produce solar energy. The state-owned company is set to make use of its vast land holdings and, by 2030, install enough solar panels to generate the same amount of power as a large nuclear reactor. It's hoped that will cover 15 to 20% of the firm's electricity needs. SNCF's president says about €1 billion is needed to fund the project. And finally, Uber Eats, DoorDash and other delivery companies sued New York City this Thursday over a law that sets minimum wages for food delivery workers. The legislation, which comes into effect next week, requires the companies to either pay workers around 50 cents for every minute they spend on a trip, or pay them a minimum of $17.96 per hour. Well, workers are currently paid per trip, and the companies say the per-minute rate could end up being significantly higher than the minimum wage set for other industries. Well, that wraps up the business news for now, Mark.
Karis, thank you very much indeed. Karis Garland there with all the business. Time to go truthing or faking. Vedika Bahal is